Thank you everyone for the time. So my name's Jason. I'm the CEO and founder of Ava. I'll be taking you through some thoughts and ideas on digital twins in mining. Before we get into the details of it, I'd like to start with a bit of a thought experiment for everyone. So you own a piece of land, right? And to drill the land is going to cost you $10 US. Now, if you drill the land, there's a 90% chance that there isn't any coal or anything underneath it. But if there is coal, it's worth $200. So now, do you choose to drill the land or not? So let's look at this as a decision. So what we've got is if we don't drill, well, then we make nothing. And if we drill, it costs us $10. And if there's no coal, well, then we lose our $10. And if there is coal, we gain $200. So in the event of A, we've got a 10% probability of getting $190 because that's our $200 minus our $10. And we've got a 90% probability of losing $10. So the net gain of this event is actually $10. So yeah, we definitely should drill. I hope you all pick that as your answer. But now I'm going to complicate the situation a little bit further. And I'm going to say, should we hire a geologist? Now, if we hire this geologist, it's going to cost us $7. Okay. Now, if the geologist says that there is coal, they are correct 95% of the time. If the geologist says there isn't coal, they're correct 85% of the time. So the geologist is presenting us with imperfect information at a cost of $7 US. So should we hire this geologist? So if we look at the probabilities, if the geologist says that there is coal, it increases the likelihood of there being coal to 23% because we multiply our two probabilities. And if the geologist says there's no coal, we then have a 77% probability of that being the case. So our odds have changed considerably. Now, what does that look like in our decision tree? So what I'd like to talk to first is this event G. So I've got that in the top left-hand corner here. And the event G is to say we hire the geologist. They give us good prospects and say we think there is coal. We then choose to drill. And when we drill, we've got a 41% chance now that there is coal. And the rest is that there is no coal. So our 41% probability gives us an effective value of $72. At that point, if we make the decision to follow that route. So therefore, the decision at E would be to drill. I mean, it would make sense by this time that you've got good prospects, you wouldn't say, let's not drill. Now, if we look at point F here in our decision tree, what we're looking at is that if the prospects are poor and we still choose to drill, what's the chances that there's coal? Well, it's very small, 0.65% by our $200 minus our drilling costs. Well, we're actually worse off than not drilling at all or not doing anything. We've got a negative value. So therefore, the decision at D, if there's poor prospects, excuse me, would be not to drill at all. So if we look at event E now, we've got to apply our probability, our 23% that the prospects are good, there is coal, to our value of the underlying decision, which is $72, and our net impact is $16.7. Now, what we need to factor in then is that for that $16, we've got a $10 cost for the drill, which leaves us with $6.69. Okay. So we need to now subtract the geologist's costs, which is $7. So it actually doesn't make sense to hire the geologist. And I hope it was a realization for you as much as it was for me, but in our base case A, we could actually just drill and the net value was actually higher than having hired the geologist to go and come up with a good or poor prospects. And this is really the case, is can we use partial information, not perfect or imperfect information, to make better assessments about what we need to act on now to improve our operations? So let's get into digital twins then and see how this all ties together. So the vision of a digital twin itself refers to a comprehensive physical and functional description of a component, product, or system, which includes more or less all information which could be useful in all the current and subsequent life cycle phases. So we've got great examples of where digital twins make a lot of sense and they just accept it as part of the norm in terms of how we design and operate. We just saw Austin with some great examples of FEA. I had an example here of a turbine blade. It's just the way that it's done. It's the same for production lines and manufacturing. And I got a little home rig here of a flight simulator that's considered, really, really great for training purposes and the way of doing things. So why is it that digital twins don't really, they haven't become commonplace in mining industry or rolled out as just everyday operations? And I think this is really important at this stage when there's a big movement towards remote operating centers. And so what I'm proposing is I've created a quadrant to try and categorize the various versions of digital twins that we're starting to see emerge in the market. So I've on the x-axis, I've put up simulated versus real-time measurement. And on the y-axis, I've looked at individual systems to integrated systems. And I found this quite useful because in the top right here, we've got simulated and integrated. So there's some really great simulation packages out there that will actually model your historical data and use that to present an integrated mine plan. And that can be really useful. And then at the bottom side of the scale, we've got individual using real-time management. And we actually look at that for scenario testing. If you're running, say, a water pump and you wanted to know what happens when the pressure gets too high, you've got a scenario test on a single element or an individual system within your entire mine running. And we've seen all sorts of things from micro-scheduling as a method of output to trying to monitor and close the gap between our simulated outcomes and our linear approximations. And when I say linear approximation, I'm kind of saying, we've hit our loading rate for the last hour. And so if we look at the run rate on our production graph, we're going to do incredibly well this month and we're all going to get bonuses. So even that is a form of a digital twin in terms of forecasting what we believe is going to happen. And the real thing that I believe is of interest is this idea of a unified digital twin, is to combine the world of real-time management and real measurement together with in an integrated manner. And where we've really seen these start to pop up as large corporate mines, BHP Billiton, Rio Tinto and the likes, are the ones with the commercial power to bring all the different suppliers into the same space and force them to integrate. But it has meant that it's once-off bespoke projects with high costs attached and often limited utilization. So I've got two reasons why I think that it's been incredibly difficult to get digital twins to a state that they've become effective and commonplace in mining. And the one is the decision time horizon, and the other is inherent variation in the industry. So I'd like to share this slide. I've got to give credit to Polymathian. I saw a very similar slide in one of their presentations, but I think it just articulates the point really sensibly. When we look at decision horizons in mining, if we look at 20 years out, all the way up to real time on an exponential scale, we've got this contrast of actually wanting optionality in the long term. So if we're mining platinum and chrome, you might have two materials there. The optionality allows you to raise more capital, and you also wouldn't want to drill or create a block model that's more than necessary in terms of getting the mine operating. In the short term, flexibility and variation is really expensive. Opening up a new box cut, tramming drill rigs more than necessary, or even moving the shovel to a new area. So this creates a high level of complexity because we've got a simulated kind of long-term model, and then we've got a mine plan, and we've got the short-term real-time measurements saying this is what's actually happening, and it's reconciling those two worlds that would make a digital twin actually useful and effective on a day-to-day basis. The second one is traditional mining. We define a resource, and the variation is built into the geology, and that affects everything from our fragmentation to our road conditions and the likes. And what we do is that understanding of what's in the ground gets better with every single process we go through, and we can reconcile it. The problem with this is what happens is we get to market and we've got what we've got. We've done our best to recover what's in there. whether it's washing or processing. We've sampled it, we've shipped it, and we've got it to market, and we said, well, yeah, this is kind of what we got, and we've got to be price takers. So even if the market conditions changed, we kind of just accept what it is. Now, in the current digital twins, or the most popular kind of simulated unified digital twins, what we see is they generate 1,000 scenarios, and then the case is pick the best scenario. But what it doesn't address is the underlying variation that exists in the geology. So we're not reducing our variation in terms of understanding what's actually in the ground, or what's the value of perfect information. What it's really doing is just incorporating that variation into a number of scenarios, and then picking the best scenario of that. So what I'd like to share is a case study. This is a paper in the Mass Geosciences Journal. And I think it's particularly interesting, as I hope you'll find out too. It's a lignite mine in Germany. The bottom left-hand picture here simplifies what they did. They took the reserve block model, and then they updated it with production activity. That production activity was 2 online analyzers that ran over the conveyor belts, and had 6 shovels working that would load. And then they'd use the information of those scanners to try and update the reserves model and the block model. From that new updated block model, they would then generate a number of schedules that's presented on the right-hand side, all with the view of optimizing percentage ash content. That was their primary metric for the study, and just to look at that one property. So from that, they could then analyze these schedules and understand, what the value of that online analyzer was. So in the top right-hand chart here, what they did was establish the value of perfect information. Now obviously there's no perfect information in mining and geology, but what we could do is take all those schedules that came out of this forecasting engine, and then actually take the best ones that met the ash content perfectly. So if you see the benchmark model in the bottom right here, we've got 10.7%, a relatively low box plots with consistent grade. So they took the various schedules that would align with this perfectly and used that as a measure of what perfect information would be like. And then what we could do is use the model and use the real-time data to improve that model week on week until it began to converge on perfect information. So what we can do is now establish, you'll see we've got the prior model and then the 4th of August. So the subsequent model, the variation in the box plot is considerably less. So it's actually improved on the previous model. So with each time the model gets better. And I hope it's not too small on the screen, but the very principle of it is how do we use that real-time data to improve our schedule going forward in the next one. So it's using this initial layer of data before we have perfect information. And the net result of this over the period of study is this chart on the right. That's the one that I want you to really, if you remember one thing, remember that, is if we had taken no action based on the online analyzers to improve how we were scheduling and mining, the value of the info, that's this bar on the left. And then when we do act on it using the best model, the best information available at the time, we get about a 22% reduction in the fines associated, so not fines, but penalties associated with not having the correct ash content. And had we actually had perfect information at that point of time, there's actually a 60% reduction in those fines associated with not hitting the correct ash content. And the value of this is to say, when building a digital twin, at what point is it economically feasible to include that measurement in your digital twin? In the same way, our geologist at the top of the presentation wasn't worth paying for because their information wasn't perfect enough. Had they given us a 99% certainty, it would have actually been economical to hire that geologist. And in the same way, we need to decide what is it that we're going to measure in our digital twin that over a period of time, the probability would suggest that it will add more value than deteriorate that value. And that's what we can use to understand whether the models we're building will actually produce the results we expect or not. So what I'd like to propose is a framework for building, effective digital twins in remote operating centers, is to create a sandbox. And that's really where IoT comes in. We've got thousands of data points coming to a single place. How do we aggregate and make sense of those and include them in a model? And I'll give you an example now of how data needs to be aggregated at a different level to make it effective for certain modeling techniques. And then within that sandbox, or that safe space, where you won't break anything when you run these models, is the black box. And the black box really can hold anything. So linear programming, you'll know that from dispatching type algorithms to genetic algorithms, machine learning. But what we can do is create those models in a safe black box. You've got inputs and outputs, and we can compare them against each other. So then for unique conditions at unique mines, we can establish digital twins that work for them with only the levers that make sense in terms of a cost perspective, or the value of that information in terms of real-time activities to be included in that digital twin. And that's the framework that we'd like to take forward and think about more and develop a bit more, possibly. So I mentioned I'd go into one of the examples. As it stands, one of our tools is a load and haul fleet management system that's based off GSM data. And what that's meant is that we often have latency challenges. So we run coordinates. At a later stage, we might get more GPS coordinates and it might change our outlook. So we've made a prediction and then we have to rerun it and we create a new prediction. So we're operating on imperfect information until we get an updated view of that information. And this is an example of looking at the loading rates within 3 shovels. I've included 3,700 cycles in this. And we look at the probability of hang time in the first 1 to 10 loads of the shift, the next 10 loads, up to 40 to 50 loads. And what we see is that the duration of the hang time drops from 5.92 minutes to 3 minutes as the truck starts cycling. So truck leaves the hard park and it gets down to the loader, but then all the trucks arrive at the same time. They all go and dump, they all bunch at the dumping and they come back. So this is about getting into steady state. But this is a probability. There's a probability that hang time occurs within the first 1 to 10 loads, and there's a probability that it occurs between loads 40 and 50. So if you're using a linear or dynamic dispatching system, it wouldn't respond to that probability correctly in the way we'd expect. A discrete event simulation would pick this up, but it's using historical data and it's generating 1,000 different scenarios. And in real time, you would have to pick, well, what is the next best scenario going forward? So it's providing data like this into a sandbox that we think would allow us to start developing the correct models that will make digital twins commonplace across the whole industry. That's my thoughts on the subject. I'd love to take any questions. And
thanks, Jason. Glad to see you got the technical issue there. Okay, I mean, I got one here from someone that actually sent me a WhatsApp. What do you mean by digital twins? Can you, in layman's terms, apparently?
Okay, so I mean, I mentioned it briefly, but it ranges anything from a predictive model to say we're currently doing this well. We're doing 1,000 tons an hour. We expect to hold that for the next 10 hours. We're going to do 10,000 tons today. It's a prediction about how the mine is currently operating. So we want a digital representation of the mine so that we can make an assessment about what the next best action is. Okay. In short.
You had mentioned early on partial, based on partial info. I'm assuming you mean by, like, for example, in Indonesia, we use a lot of times the geological formation mapping. Are you saying that we could do this without actually putting holes in the ground, or how do you? Yeah.
To view it as layers of information. So that particular Lignite example, what they were using was the current block to infer better understanding of the blocks around it. So as you start mining, you're improving your assessment of what's coming in the next block. So what we can do is use all these different layers to have a better understanding. So the one might be an online analyzer. At a later stage, we might sample a stockpile. The important thing is that when we re-baseline what is in that stockpile based on a sample is that we forward propagate it. And then we use the reconciliation historically to improve our understanding of the block model. And through that, we can reduce the variation. Yeah.
Yes, you're taking traditional data, borehole data, et cetera, and mine plan data, and you're just extrapolating that further into a digital solution.
Yeah, and the important part is that I'm not professing to have the answers. I mean, we supply IoT data that's aggregated in a certain way, and what we're noticing in the industry is that there's no clear answer to effective digital twins that are integrated. And from my perspective, I'm saying unless we can create a safe space where we can sample and experiment with these different data sources, we're not going to arrive at the most optimal outcome. We know if you compare modern solvers, machine learning and genetic algorithms with linear programming, the results are stark. I mean, you can get an additional 12% out of a genetic algorithm next to linear programming, depending on the problem you're solving. But within that is the context of what is the value of accurate information? Because everything has error in it. And the question is it still valuable even though there is error in our current measurement? Right.
Well, 12%, oh, that's a lot of coin in most cases. That's fantastic. Yeah. From Sujesh Sahai, Jason, how is your system different from mine planning software that are in the market?
So just to classify, AVA as a company is a fleet management system that is on a subscription basis. It's really cost effective and easy to run. Our digital twin product is a work in progress, and this is more an approach to how we believe digital twins would become more successful. The planning solutions typically are a single function use. So although it's a presented CAD model and it may update with time, is how do we use the real-time data that we currently have to affect our operations? So if you think of short interval control, yeah.
Right.